The morning sun cut through the blinds of Donald Trump's office in Mar-a-Lago. He sat behind his desk, thumbing through a stack of papers that had been delivered just an hour earlier. His face, usually animated and expressive, was unusually still as he read. "Get Mike on the phone," he said to his assistant without looking up. The papers had come from an unexpected source, a former State Department official who had worked during Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. The official, now retired and concerned about what they had witnessed, had compiled a dossier of meetings, emails, and financial transactions that painted a troubling picture. Trump had been out of office for some time now, but the political fires that drove him had never really died down. His rivalry with Hillary Clinton was the stuff of political legend, stretching back years before either had sought the presidency. As he reviewed the documents, he felt that familiar spark of competitive energy. The phone on his desk buzzed. "Mike's on line 1, sir." Trump picked up the receiver. "Mike, you need to see what just landed on my desk." Mike Thompson had been with Trump through thick and thin, campaign strategist, advisor, and now the head of Trump's private intelligence team. Unlike the bombastic public image Trump often projected, Mike was quiet, methodical, and precise. "I'll be there in 2 hours," Mike replied. The documents were spread across the large oak table in Trump's private meeting room when Mike arrived. Trump paced by the windows, looking out at the manicured golf course beyond. "This came from Robert Chen," Trump said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Former State Department, worked under Clinton. Says he's been sitting on this for years, afraid to come forward." Mike raised an eyebrow. "And why come to you instead of the authorities?" Trump shrugged. "Says he tried. Got nowhere. Says the connections are too powerful." Mike began methodically reviewing the papers. His expression revealed nothing as he read page after page, occasionally making notes on a small pad. After nearly an hour, he looked up. "If this is legitimate, it's significant," he said. "Chen is alleging that the Clinton Foundation served as a backdoor channel for foreign interests to gain favorable treatment from the State Department." Trump nodded. "That's what I read too. The question is, can we verify it?" "Some of it easily," Mike replied. "The meetings happened. They're in the public record. The donations to the foundation are documented. The policy shifts that followed, also documented. But proving intent, proving a quid pro quo?" He trailed off. "That's where we need to dig." Trump finished the thought. Over the next week, Trump and Mike built a small team. They were careful about who they brought in. This kind of investigation required discretion. There was Lisa Alvarez, a former financial crimes investigator with a reputation for finding money trails others missed. Jack Wilson, a veteran political researcher who had contacts in every government agency worth knowing. And finally, Kim Park, a data analyst who could make sense of the mountains of information they would need to process. The team set up in a secure room at Trump Tower in New York. The walls soon became covered with timelines, connection maps, and key names. At the center of it all was Hillary Clinton, and around her a web of foundations, lobbying firms, foreign businesses, and government officials. "The pattern is becoming clear," Lisa said on the 10th day of their investigation. She stood before the main board, pointing to a series of transactions. Every major policy decision favorable to these 3 countries was preceded by a large donation to the foundation, followed by meetings with these lobbying firms, who then met with Clinton or her top aides. Jack nodded, adding, "And these lobbying firms never registered as foreign agents, which they would be required to do by law if they were representing foreign interests. But we still don't have the smoking gun," Trump said, leaning forward in his chair. "We need something that directly connects Clinton to knowledge of this scheme." Kim, who had been quietly working at her computer, suddenly spoke up. "I might have something." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "I've been analyzing the email patterns between Clinton's private server and these lobbying firms. There's a gap, a 2-week period where all communication suddenly stops. But during that same period, there's a new pattern of encrypted messages going to a private email account that I believe belongs to Clinton's chief of staff." "Can you crack the encryption?" Trump asked. Kim shook her head. "Not directly. But I can tell you that whatever they were discussing, they went to great lengths to hide it." Trump stood and walked to the window, looking out at the New York skyline. This was the moment of decision. They had uncovered enough to raise serious questions, but not enough to prove wrongdoing beyond doubt. "We need someone on the inside," he said finally. "Someone who was part of these meetings." Mike nodded slowly. "I might know someone. A former aide who left Clinton's team under less than favorable circumstances. They might be willing to talk, especially if they're granted anonymity." "Make the call," Trump said. 3 days later, they sat in a private dining room at a small restaurant in Washington, D.C. The former aide, whose name was kept even from Trump for plausible deniability, sat across from Mike speaking in hushed tones. "Yes, we all knew what was happening," the aide confirmed. "It was never stated explicitly, but the understanding was clear. The foundation was the entry point. Foreign governments and businesses would make donations, and in return they'd get access. Access led to influence, influence led to policy. And Clinton knew?" Mike pressed. The aide nodded. "Nothing happened without her knowledge. She was meticulous about knowing where the money came from and what the donors wanted. She kept her distance publicly, but privately she directed everything." "Would you be willing to go on record?" Mike asked. The aide's face paled. "No, these people are powerful. They can ruin careers, ruin lives." Mike slid a small recorder across the table. "Just your voice, no name. We can disguise it." The aide hesitated, then nodded. "For the country, yes." Back at Trump Tower, the team listened to the recording. The voice was distorted for protection, but the words were clear and damning. "We've got enough to go public," Trump declared. "Not yet," Lisa cautioned. "We need to anticipate the counterattack. They'll question our source, our methods, our motives. We need to be bulletproof." Trump nodded reluctantly. "How much longer?" 2 weeks, Mike said. "We verify everything our source told us. We build the complete picture. And then we go public with a case so strong they can't ignore it." As the team continued their work, news began to leak that Trump was investigating something big. Clinton's allies in Washington began to stir, making calls, asking questions. The political temperature rose as rumors spread. In the secure room, the team worked with renewed urgency. They knew it was a race against time now. If Clinton's people discovered the specifics of their investigation before they were ready, vital evidence might disappear. "We've got movement," Jack announced one morning, hanging up his phone. "One of my contacts says there's unusual activity at the law firm that represents the Clinton Foundation. They're pulling records, having emergency meetings. They know something's coming," Trump said.
"How close are we?"
"We've verified about 70% of what our source told us," Kim replied. "The money trails match, the meeting times match, the policy changes match." Trump made a decision. "We move our timeline up. 1 week from today, we go public with what we have." The team worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts. The wall of evidence grew. Connections became clearer, and the picture they were assembling grew more disturbing by the day. On the morning they were set to go public, Trump stood before the assembled team. "What we've uncovered here isn't just about politics," he said. "It's about the integrity of our government. It's about whether foreign money can buy American policy. Whatever happens next, we've done the right thing by bringing this to light." As the team made final preparations, news channels were already reporting that Donald Trump was about to make a major announcement regarding Hillary Clinton. The political world held its breath, wondering what bombshell was about to drop, and how it would reshape the landscape of American politics once again. In the calm before the storm, Trump looked at the evidence one last time. The rivalry between him and Clinton had always been fierce, but this went beyond personal politics. If what they had uncovered was true, and he believed it was, then the American people deserved to know. With that thought firmly in mind, he prepared to step into the spotlight and share their findings with the world. The press conference had sent shockwaves through Washington. Donald Trump, standing before a room packed with journalists, had laid out the first pieces of evidence suggesting a connection between the Clinton Foundation and unregistered foreign lobbying efforts. He had been careful not to make accusations he couldn't back up, but the implications were clear. "We're just getting started," he had told the reporters. "There's much more to come." Now back in the secure room at Trump Tower, the real work began. The team had gone public with enough to grab attention, but they knew they needed more to make the case stick. The money trail was where they would find it. Lisa Alvarez sat hunched over her laptop, surrounded by financial statements, tax filings, and donation records. Her eyes were tired from staring at numbers, but her mind was sharp as ever. The foundation's public records show donations from these 7 countries, she said, pushing a list across the table to Trump. But the amounts don't match what we're seeing in the banking records. Meaning what? Trump asked, scanning the list. Meaning there's money moving around that isn't being reported, Lisa explained. For example, this energy company from Eastern Europe donated $10 million officially. But I'm tracking an additional $15 million that moved through 3 different shell companies before, ending up in accounts controlled by this lobbying firm. She pointed to a name that had become familiar to them all. Global Policy Partners. Jack Wilson let out a low whistle. GPP again. They keep showing up. And who controls GPP? Trump asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. On paper, it's run by Thomas Baker, Mike said, former Clinton campaign staffer who later worked at the State Department. But the interesting part is who else works there. He pulled up a slide on the main screen showing an organizational chart. 3 former senior advisors to Clinton, 2 former foundation executives, and 4 former State Department officials who served under her. It's practically a Clinton alumni association. Trump nodded slowly. And they're not registered as foreign agents? No, Jack confirmed. They're registered as a domestic policy consultancy, but their client list is almost exclusively foreign governments and businesses with interests before the State Department during Clinton's tenure. Kim Park, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, spoke up. I've been tracking the meeting patterns. In 83% of cases, within 3 days of a major donation to the foundation, representatives from GPP would meet with Clinton's chief of staff. Within 2 weeks of those meetings, policy decisions favorable to the donors would be announced. The room fell silent as they absorbed the implications. That's correlation, not causation, Lisa cautioned. Any good defense lawyer would tear that apart. Then we need to find causation, Trump said firmly. We need communications, internal memos, something that shows intent. I might have something, Kim said. She walked to the main screen and pulled up a series of emails. These were obtained legally through FOIA requests, she clarified. They're emails between Clinton's deputy chief of staff and the head of GPP. The team gathered around to read. The emails were carefully worded, but in the context of what they now knew, the meaning seemed clear. The friends from overseas are very happy with the outcome of the recent policy review, one email read. They're looking forward to expressing their continued appreciation to the foundation. Another was even more direct. Need to discuss the Baltic situation before the Secretary's upcoming trip. Our friends have significant concerns that they'd like addressed. They're prepared to be very generous in return. Trump read the emails twice. This is getting closer, but it's still not enough. We need something that ties Clinton directly to this. Jack cleared his throat. I have a contact at the Treasury Department. They've been quietly investigating some of these same financial transactions under suspicion of money laundering. They might have information we don't. Can they share it with us? Mike asked. Jack shrugged. Officially, no. But unofficially, let me make a call. 2 days later, Jack returned with a thumb drive. My contact couldn't give me anything directly, he explained. But they pointed me to where I could legally find some very interesting information. The thumb drive contained records of wire transfers, banking transactions, and corporate filings that showed a pattern more complex than they had imagined. Money flowed from foreign entities to the foundation, from the foundation to research institutes and think tanks, from those organizations to GPP, and finally from GPP to a network of consultants and advisors, many of whom had direct access to Clinton. It's like a washing machine for influence, Lisa observed. The money goes in dirty, as obvious attempts to buy policy, and comes out clean as legitimate-seeming consulting fees and research grants. Trump paced the room, processing the information. But where's Clinton in all this? These records show the system, but not her role in it. Mike had been quietly reviewing a separate set of documents, the personal financial disclosures that Clinton had been required to file as Secretary of State. I think I found something, he said slowly. Look at these speaking fees. He highlighted a series of entries showing payments for speeches Clinton had given after leaving office. $300,000 for a speech to this banking group, $400,000 for this energy conference, $500,000 for this trade association. All organizations connected to the donors were tracking. That's not unusual for former officials, Lisa pointed out. Speaking fees are common. Yes, but look at the timing, Mike insisted. Each of these speeches happened within months of favorable policy decisions she made while in office. And the amounts are far above market rate, even for someone of her stature. The team began cross-referencing the speaking engagements with the policy decisions and donation records they had already assembled. A pattern emerged, one that suggested the speaking fees might have been delayed compensation for official actions. "This could be our smoking gun," Trump said. Not the foundation itself, but this whole ecosystem of money movement, donations, consulting fees, speaking payments, all tied to policy decisions. But they still needed more. Hard evidence that Clinton knew about and directed this system. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A whistleblower from within GPP reached out to Jack through a secure channel. The individual, fearing retaliation, wouldn't meet in person but was willing to provide documents, internal memos and meeting notes that had never been meant for public eyes. The team gathered around as Jack opened the encrypted files. What they found exceeded their expectations. Meeting minutes that explicitly discussed deliverables for foreign clients in terms of State Department policies. Strategy documents that outlined how to route money through the foundation to avoid scrutiny, and, most damning of all, emails that referenced direct conversations with HRC about ensuring that donors received the access and outcomes they expected. "This is it," Trump said quietly. "This is what we needed." The evidence was compelling, but they knew that going public with it would trigger an unprecedented political firestorm. Clinton's allies would fight back with everything they had. The media would be divided along partisan lines. The team needed to be absolutely certain their case was bulletproof. Lisa suggested bringing in independent experts, respected former prosecutors, and ethics officials who could review their evidence and provide credibility to their findings. Jack recommended briefing select members of Congress who had oversight responsibility, regardless of party affiliation. Trump agreed to both suggestions, understanding that for the allegations to be taken seriously, they needed to transcend partisan politics. Over the next 2 weeks, the team quietly met with former Justice Department officials, congressional staffers from both parties, and independent ethics experts. They shared their evidence, answered questions, and refined their case based on feedback. Most of those who reviewed the evidence agreed it was serious and warranted further investigation. Some pointed out weaknesses in certain parts of the case, which the team worked to address. A few dismissed it entirely as politically motivated, but they were in the minority. As they prepared for their full public reveal, Trump received a phone call from a familiar number, a prominent news anchor who had covered his political career for years. "Hear you're about to go public with something big about Clinton," the anchor said without preamble. "We've been approached by someone claiming to have information that undermines your entire investigation." Care to comment? Trump's heart sank. Someone had leaked, or Clinton's team had figured out more than they should have. Either way, the counterattack was beginning before they were ready. "No comment at this time," Trump replied carefully, "but I'd be interested to know what kind of information they're claiming to have. They say your main source has a grudge against Clinton and has fabricated evidence. They say they can prove it." After hanging up, Trump immediately convened the team. "They're trying to get ahead of us," he explained. "They're going to try to discredit our sources." Mike frowned. "Which source?" "We have dozens at this point, plus documentary evidence from multiple channels." "It doesn't matter," Lisa said. "This is about creating doubt, muddying the waters. Classic deflection strategy." Trump made a decision. "We move now. Today. We've been methodical, we've checked and rechecked everything. It's time to lay it all out for the American people." The team sprang into action, preparing their full presentation of evidence. They organized it into clear, understandable segments: the donation patterns, the lobbying connections, the policy decisions, the financial flows, and the internal communications that tied it all together. As evening fell over New York City, they gathered one last time in the secure room before facing the press. The wall that had started with just a few photos and documents was now covered with evidence, a comprehensive map of a lobbying scheme that had operated in the shadows for years. Trump looked at his team, the financial expert, the political researcher, the data analyst, and his trusted advisor. Together they had uncovered something that powerful forces had tried to keep hidden. "Whatever happens next," he told them, "you've done your country a service. The American people deserve to know how their government really works, who's really pulling the strings. Today, we pull back the curtain. With those words, they left the security of their war room and headed downstairs where the press waited. It was time to show the world exactly what they had found, and let the chips fall where they may. The elevator doors closed, taking them down to what they all knew would be one of the most explosive press conferences in American political history. The quiet ding of each passing floor marked their descent into what would surely be a political battlefield, unlike any they had faced before. The morning after Trump's team revealed their full findings, Washington, D.C. felt like a city under siege. News vans lined the streets around Capitol Hill. Phones rang nonstop in congressional offices. Social media exploded with hot takes, accusations, and defenses, and at the center of it all was the evidence that Trump's team had meticulously assembled over weeks of investigation. Trump himself watched the morning news coverage from his hotel suite in Washington. Every channel showed clips from yesterday's press conference, where he had laid out the case against Clinton's lobbying network in painstaking detail. The reactions were exactly as expected, divided along partisan lines, with supporters calling it a bombshell and critics dismissing it as a political stunt. But what mattered wasn't the immediate reaction. What mattered was what happened next. His phone rang. It was Mike. The Senate Oversight Committee just announced emergency hearings, Mike reported. They want us to testify next week. Trump nodded, though Mike couldn't see it. Good, that's what we wanted. Who else are they calling? Clinton, obviously, though no one expects her to show. They're also calling the head of Global Policy Partners, 3 former foundation executives, and 2 former State Department officials. Who's chairing the hearings? Senator Williams, Mike replied. He's no friend of yours, but he's known for being thorough. If anyone will give this a fair hearing, it's him. Trump ended the call and turned back to the television. A spokesperson for Clinton was making a statement outside her office. These allegations are completely baseless, the spokesperson was saying, her voice tight with controlled anger. This is nothing more than a politically motivated witch hunt from a man who has never accepted his own political defeats. The former secretary has always conducted herself with the highest ethical standards, and any suggestion otherwise is simply false. Trump had expected denial, but what came next surprised him. Furthermore, the spokesperson continued, we have reason to believe that some of the so-called evidence presented yesterday has been tampered with or taken out of context. We will be presenting proof of this manipulation in the coming days. Trump immediately called the team and arranged an emergency meeting at their hotel. Within an hour, they were gathered in a private conference room, security sweeping for bugs before they began. They're claiming we manipulated evidence, Trump said without preamble, which means either they're bluffing or they've found a way to cast doubt on something specific. Lisa looked worried. Everything we presented is authentic. We verified it through multiple channels. But perception matters as much as reality here, Jack pointed out. They don't need to prove we faked anything. They just need to create enough doubt to give their allies cover to dismiss the whole thing. Kim was already on her laptop, reviewing their presentation materials. The emails would be the easiest target, she said. Digital communications can always be questioned for authenticity. Mike nodded grimly. We need to get ahead of this. We should release our full verification methodology, every step we took to confirm the authenticity of each piece of evidence. As they worked on their response strategy, events were unfolding rapidly across Washington. The Justice Department issued a carefully worded statement saying they were reviewing the allegations to determine if further investigation is warranted. The White House press secretary deflected questions, calling it a matter between private citizens. Former Clinton staffers appeared on news programs, uniformly dismissing the allegations as political theater. But behind the scenes, power was shifting. Congressional offices were being flooded with calls from constituents demanding answers. Several donors to the Clinton Foundation publicly announced they were suspending future contributions pending clarification. And most significantly, 2 prominent Democrats in Congress broke ranks to call for a formal investigation. By mid-afternoon, Trump received word that his presence was requested at the office of the FBI director. The meeting was off the record and unofficial, just an information-gathering exercise, he was told. Should I go? Trump asked his team. Absolutely, Mike said without hesitation. This means they're taking it seriously. The FBI doesn't waste the director's time on political stunts. I agree, said Jack. But take Lisa with you. She understands the financial evidence better than anyone, and that's what they'll care about most. 2 hours later, Trump and Lisa sat across from FBI Director Johnson in a plain conference room at headquarters. The director, a career law enforcement officer who had served under both Republican and Democratic administrations, got straight to the point. Mr. Trump, I want to be clear that this is not a formal interview. We're not confirming an investigation at this stage. I simply want to hear directly from you what you found and how you found it. For the next 3 hours, Trump and Lisa walked through their evidence, focusing particularly on the financial transactions and the internal communications from global policy partners. The director asked sharp, detailed questions about their sources, their verification methods, and the chain of custody for the documents they had obtained. When they finished, the director leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. I appreciate your time, he said. I need to emphasize that nothing about our meeting today should be construed as confirmation of any action by the Bureau. Trump nodded. I understand. But will you look into this? The director's expression remained neutral. The FBI takes all credible allegations of corruption seriously, regardless of who is involved. That's all I can say at this time. As Trump and Lisa left FBI headquarters, they found a crowd of reporters waiting outside. News of the meeting had leaked. Mr. Trump, is the FBI investigating Clinton based on your allegations? A reporter shouted. Did you provide new evidence to the Bureau? Called another. Trump raised a hand for quiet. I was invited to share information with Director Johnson, which I did. The FBI will make its own determination about how to proceed. That's all I have to say at this time. Back at the hotel, they found the rest of the team dealing with a new development. Clinton's lawyers had issued formal letters demanding retractions of specific claims and threatening legal action if they were not withdrawn within 48 hours. They're focusing on these 3 emails, Jack explained, highlighting them on the screen. They claim they can prove these were taken out of context or altered. Mike studied the emails in question. These aren't even the most damning ones. Why focus on these? Kim had been cross-referencing the emails with their source documentation. Because these are the only ones that came from a single source, she realized. Every other piece of evidence we have is corroborated by multiple sources. They're attacking our weakest point. Can they actually prove anything was altered? Trump asked. Lisa shook her head. No, because nothing was. But they might be able to create confusion about the context. Trump made a decision. We don't retract anything, but we also don't engage in a side battle over these specific emails. They're trying to narrow the focus to something they think they can discredit. We keep the focus on the big picture, the pattern of donations, meetings, and policy shifts. The next morning brought news that Clinton had agreed to a single television interview to address the allegations. The network had promised tough but fair questioning, and the interview would air live. Without editing, Trump and his team gathered to watch. Knowing that Clinton was a skilled communicator who had weathered political storms before, the interviewer began with appropriately challenging questions, pressing Clinton on the timing of donations and subsequent policy decisions. Clinton responded with practiced ease, dismissing any connections as coincidental and noting that policy decisions were made by large teams, not by her alone. The State Department employs thousands of dedicated career professionals who develop policy recommendations based on America's interests. Not on outside influence, she said smoothly. When asked about the unregistered foreign lobbying allegations, Clinton pivoted. Global Policy Partners is an independent firm. I had no role in their operations or client relationships. As for former staffers working there, people move between government and the private sector all the time. There's nothing unusual or improper about that. But when confronted with the internal emails and financial records, Clinton's composure briefly faltered. I'm not familiar with those specific communications, she said, a slight edge entering her voice. But I would point out that Mr. Trump has a long history of making accusations that don't stand up to scrutiny. And I find it interesting that these so-called revelations come just as the country is focused on other important issues. The interviewer pressed harder. But these documents appear to show a systematic effort to route foreign influence through your foundation and associated firms. Can you definitively state that no donations to your foundation ever influenced State Department policy under your leadership? Clinton's answer was careful. I can state definitively that I never took any official action as Secretary of State because of donations to the Foundation. The Foundation's work has saved countless lives around the world, and I'm proud of that legacy. These attacks are an attempt to undermine that important work. After the interview, political analysts were split on how effective Clinton's defense had been. Some thought she had successfully deflected the most serious allegations. Others noted that she had never directly addressed the specific evidence Trump had presented. Meanwhile, Washington's machinery was grinding into motion. The Senate Oversight Committee formally scheduled hearings. The Justice Department assigned a team of prosecutors to review the evidence. And most surprisingly, a group of Democratic lawmakers sent a letter to Clinton urging her to address the allegations more directly for the good of the party and the country. Trump received an unexpected call that evening from an old political rival, a senior senator who had been critical of him in the past. "I've reviewed what you've put together," the senator said without preamble. "It's compelling. Not conclusive, but compelling enough that it can't be ignored." "Does that mean you'll support the investigation?" Trump asked. "It means I'll insist on it being thorough and fair," the senator replied. "No whitewash, but no witch hunt either. The American people deserve the truth, whatever it is." As the week progressed, the battle lines became clearer. Clinton's team adopted a three-pronged strategy: question the authenticity of the most damaging evidence, attack Trump's motives, and flood the media with surrogates emphasizing Clinton's positive legacy. Trump's team countered by releasing additional corroborating evidence each day, focusing public attention on the parts of their case that were most clearly documented. They also began working closely with the Senate committee staff to prepare for the hearings. The Washington establishment, initially dismissive, was now taking the allegations seriously. Long-dormant investigations into the Clinton Foundation were being quietly reopened. Foreign governments mentioned in the evidence were issuing carefully worded statements, distancing themselves from any improper lobbying efforts. 7 days after the initial revelation, Trump received a text message from a blocked number. "West Exec entrance, Lincoln Memorial, midnight. Come alone." Trump showed the message to Mike. "Could be a trap," Mike warned. "Could also be a legitimate source, someone who can't be seen meeting you officially." After debate, they decided Trump would go, but with precautions. Security would be nearby but out of sight. Mike would be on a live communication link, and Trump would wear a recording device both for his protection and to document anything he learned. At midnight, Trump stood at the western entrance to the Lincoln Memorial. The monument was officially closed, but the area was public and relatively easy to monitor for security. For 10 minutes, no one approached. Trump was about to leave when a figure emerged from the shadows. The man was in his 60s, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone comfortable in the corridors of power. Trump recognized him immediately, a senior official in the previous administration, someone who had worked closely with Clinton. "I can't be seen with you," the man said quietly, "and I will deny this meeting ever happened." "I understand," Trump replied. "Why are you here?" The man looked around nervously. "Because what you've found is just the tip of the iceberg. There are people in Washington, powerful people, who don't want this to go any further. Not because they care about protecting Clinton, but because the system you're exposing is bigger than her. It's how things work here." "Tell me," Trump said. The man stepped closer. "The hearing next week is going to be shut down. They'll cite national security concerns, classified information that can't be discussed in public. It's already been decided. Who decided it? People who benefit from keeping things as they are." The man checked his watch. "That's all I can say. Do with it what you will." Before Trump could ask another question, the man melted back into the darkness. Trump immediately called Mike, who had heard everything through the live link. "What do you think?" Trump asked. "Could be disinformation," Mike said. "Trying to make us look paranoid if we start claiming the hearing will be canceled. Or it could be legitimate. Either way, we need insurance," Trump decided. "Tomorrow morning we release everything, all of it, to the public. Every document, every email, every financial record. Let the American people see it all before anyone can shut it down." The next morning, as Washington awoke, the complete dossier of evidence went live on a specially created website. Every news organization in the country received a link simultaneously. The site included not just the raw evidence but detailed explanations of how each piece fit into the larger pattern. By noon, the website had crashed from too much traffic. By evening, the hashtag a lobbying scheme was trending worldwide, and shortly before midnight, the chairman of the Senate Oversight Committee announced that the hearing would proceed as scheduled, but with expanded scope and additional witnesses. The Washington machine that had tried to contain the story now found itself caught in a flood it couldn't control. The confrontation was moving from the back rooms to the main stage, and the American people were paying attention. As Trump prepared for his testimony before the committee, he knew that the real battle was just beginning. The evidence was out there now, impossible to ignore or suppress. What remained to be seen was whether a system long accustomed to protecting its own would finally be forced to change. The hearing was set for 9 a.m. Monday morning. The weekend news shows were dominated by speculation about what would happen. And across Washington, powerful people who had long operated in the shadows found themselves uncomfortably exposed to the light. The Senate hearing room was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. News cameras lined the back wall, their red lights glowing like watchful eyes. The air felt electric with tension and anticipation. Donald Trump sat at the witness table, flanked by Mike and Lisa. They had prepared for days, reviewing their evidence, anticipating questions, and practicing their responses. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about proving a case to the American people. Senator Williams, the committee chairman, gavelled the hearing to order. His opening statement was measured, emphasizing the seriousness of the allegations while cautioning against rushing to judgment. These hearings are not a trial, he reminded everyone. Our purpose is fact-finding, not prosecution. We will hear testimony from multiple witnesses, examine evidence, and determine whether further action by appropriate authorities is warranted. The ranking minority member followed with a more pointed statement, suggesting the hearings were politically motivated and a waste of taxpayer resources. But even she acknowledged that the evidence presented warranted examination. Then it was Trump's turn. He had 15 minutes for his opening statement before the questioning would begin. The room fell silent as he leaned toward the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here today not as a politician, but as a citizen concerned about the integrity of our government. What my team has uncovered over the past weeks suggests a troubling pattern of foreign influence operating through a network of foundations, lobbying firms, and consultants, all connected to former Secretary of State Clinton. Trump's voice was calm and deliberate, a stark contrast to his usual bombastic style. He understood that in this setting, measured credibility would be more effective than fiery accusations. We will show you evidence of foreign donations to the Clinton Foundation that coincided with favorable policy decisions. We will show you emails and internal documents from lobbying firms staffed by former Clinton aides that explicitly discuss trading access for donations. And we will demonstrate how this entire system operated without proper registration under foreign lobbying laws. As Trump spoke, large screens displayed key documents, with relevant portions highlighted. The visual evidence made his case more compelling than words alone could have. This isn't about politics, he concluded. It's about whether we truly have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, or whether foreign interests can buy influence through the right connections and the right donations. The American people deserve to know the truth. The questioning began, alternating between senators from both parties. Some were clearly hostile, attempting to undermine Trump's credibility or the provenance of his evidence. Others seemed genuinely concerned about the substance of the allegations, probing for details and clarification. Senator Reynolds, known for his prosecutorial background, leaned forward. Mr. Trump, you've presented emails suggesting that Global Policy Partners was explicitly connecting donations to policy outcomes. But couldn't these be interpreted as simple fundraising efforts, not quid pro quo arrangements? Trump deferred to Lisa, who had handled the financial aspects of their investigation. She pulled up specific emails on the display screens. If these were ordinary fundraising communications, that might be a reasonable interpretation, she explained. But look at the language here. Our friends from the Gulf need the arms approval by next month. They're prepared to make the usual arrangement with the foundation if we can deliver. And here, the Secretary's position on the trade agreement satisfied our Asian clients. Expect the donation to be processed through the usual channels, Lisa continued. These aren't fundraising requests. They're discussions of completed arrangements where policy decisions and donations are directly linked. Another senator pressed on the authenticity of the documents. How can we be certain these emails haven't been altered or taken out of context? Mike addressed this question. Every document we've presented has been verified through multiple channels. The emails were obtained legally through FOIA requests, whistleblower disclosures, and from publicly available sources. We've provided the committee with our complete verification methodology, including digital forensic analysis confirming their authenticity. As the morning progressed, Trump's team effectively parried the skeptical questions while building their case through the more sympathetic ones. The tide seemed to be turning, with even some initially hostile senators appearing troubled by the evidence. During a brief recess, Mike whispered to Trump, "We're making headway. Even Reynolds seems concerned, and he's been Clinton's biggest defender on the committee." Trump nodded slightly. "Stay focused. The counterattack is coming." He was right. When the hearing resumed, the tone shifted. Several senators began questioning Trump's motives rather than addressing the evidence. "Isn't it true that you've had a personal vendetta against Secretary Clinton for years?" one asked pointedly. Trump remained calm. "My personal opinions are irrelevant to the facts we've presented. The documents speak for themselves. If anything I've shown today is factually incorrect, I welcome correction." Another line of attack soon emerged, attempts to expand the scope beyond Clinton to implicate others from both parties. "Isn't this just how Washington works?" asked Senator Davis, his tone world-weary. "Couldn't we find similar patterns with many former officials, including those from your own administration?" Trump didn't take the bait. If there's evidence of similar schemes, they should absolutely be investigated, regardless of party. But today, we're presenting the evidence we've found regarding this specific case. The afternoon session brought testimony from other witnesses, including former officials from both the State Department and the Treasury Department. Most significantly, the former head of the Foreign Agents Registration Unit testified that his office had flagged concerns about global policy partners years earlier, but the investigation had been shut down by senior Justice Department officials. "We noted unusual patterns of activity that suggested foreign lobbying, but we were told to focus our resources elsewhere," he stated. It was unusual to have such direct intervention on what should have been a routine compliance investigation. By late afternoon, the hearing had gone on for nearly 8 hours. The committee chairman announced they would reconvene the following day with additional witnesses, including representatives from global policy partners and the Clinton Foundation. As Trump and his team left the hearing room, they were mobbed by reporters shouting questions. They made their way through the crowd without comment, saving their remarks for a planned press conference. Once safely in their vehicles and heading back to the hotel, Mike reviewed their performance. "We did well. The evidence held up under scrutiny, and that Treasury official's testimony was unexpected support." Lisa nodded. "But tomorrow will be tougher. The Foundation and GPP representatives will come with carefully prepared defenses." "And Clinton?" Trump asked. "Any word on whether she'll appear?" Jack checked his phone. "Latest word is no. Her lawyers issued a statement saying she's declining to participate in what they call a politically motivated spectacle." Trump wasn't surprised. It's the smart play from her perspective. She doesn't want to face direct questioning under oath. Back at the hotel, the team gathered to prepare for the press conference. This would be different from the hearing, less structured, more unpredictable, and reaching a much wider audience. While the hearing had been for the official record, the press conference would shape public perception. The hotel ballroom was transformed into a media center, with a podium at the front and rows of chairs for reporters. Screens were set up to display key evidence as Trump spoke. Security was tight, with everyone entering the room subjected to metal detectors and bag searches. At precisely 7 p.m., Trump walked to the podium, his team arrayed behind him. Camera flashes erupted like lightning, and the room fell silent as he began to speak. Today, the American people got their first look at evidence of what may be one of the most significant influence-peddling schemes in recent history. For years, a shadow system has operated at the highest levels of government, a system where foreign interests could effectively buy policy outcomes through strategic donations and well-connected lobbyists. Trump's tone was serious, his usual bombast nowhere in evidence. He understood that the gravity of the moment required restraint. What we presented to the Senate committee today is not the full extent of our findings. We have additional evidence that we will release in the coming days, evidence that further demonstrates the connection between Clinton Foundation donations, unregistered foreign lobbying, and State Department decisions. This was a calculated move. By indicating there was more to come, Trump was putting Clinton's defenders on the defensive, uncertain of what might be revealed next. "I want to be clear about something," Trump continued. "This investigation has never been about politics. It's about accountability. It's about whether our government serves the American people or serves those who can afford to buy access and influence." Trump then turned to the screens, where a comprehensive timeline was displayed showing the correlation between major donations, lobbying meetings, and policy decisions. The visual impact was powerful, making clear the pattern that might be missed when looking at individual pieces of evidence. "This timeline speaks for itself," Trump said. 23 major policy decisions, each preceded by significant donations and lobbying contacts. The statistical probability of this being coincidental is virtually zero. For the next 30 minutes, Trump walked the press through the most compelling evidence, occasionally deferring to Lisa for financial details or to Jack for context on government procedures. He was methodical and focused, avoiding speculative accusations and sticking to what they could prove. When he opened the floor for questions, the reporters pounced. "Mr. Trump, will you be referring this evidence to the Justice Department for potential criminal prosecution?" asked a reporter from the Washington Post. "That decision lies with the appropriate authorities," Trump replied. "Our role has been to uncover the facts and bring them to light. How those facts are acted upon is up to the justice system." A CNN reporter followed up. "Clinton's spokesperson called your investigation a vindictive witch hunt this morning. How do you respond?" Trump smiled slightly. "I'd say look at the evidence. These aren't my claims, they're documents, emails, financial records, and testimony from multiple sources. The facts don't have political motivations." The questions continued, ranging from hostile to supportive, technical to political. Trump handled them all with unusual restraint, staying focused on the evidence rather than being drawn into personal attacks or partisan rhetoric. As the press conference was winding down, a reporter from an international news agency asked the question that many had been thinking. "Mr. Trump, if these allegations are proven true, what do you believe the consequences should be?" Trump paused, considering his words carefully. "That's not for me to decide. We have laws governing foreign lobbying, disclosure requirements, and ethical conduct in government. If those laws were broken, then the legal system should determine the appropriate consequences. My concern is ensuring that the American people know how their government has been operating, so they can demand the transparency and integrity they deserve." As Trump left the podium, the room erupted with shouted follow-up questions, but he had said what he came to say. The evidence was now public, the case had been made, and the next moves would come from others: congressional committees, law enforcement agencies, and the court of public opinion. In the privacy of their hotel suite, the team monitored the media coverage. The press conference was being carried live on every major network, with analysis and debate following. Political commentators from across the spectrum were weighing in, some dismissing the allegations as political theater, others calling it a potentially historic revelation of corruption. Most significantly, calls for formal investigations were coming from both sides of the political aisle. Several prominent Democrats had issued statements expressing concern about the evidence and calling for transparency. Republican leaders were unanimously demanding action from the Justice Department. "We've shifted the conversation," Mike observed. "A week ago, this was being dismissed as a political stunt. Now it's being treated as a serious matter requiring investigation." Trump nodded, watching the coverage with a thoughtful expression. "The truth has a way of demanding attention if you can get it in front of enough people." Lisa's phone buzzed with a news alert. She read it aloud. "Breaking. Attorney General announces appointment of special counsel to investigate Clinton Foundation and lobbying allegations." The room fell silent. This was a major development, one that moved the matter firmly into the realm of law enforcement rather than political posturing. "They had no choice," Jack said finally. "The evidence is too compelling to ignore and public pressure is building." Trump turned away from the television. "Our work isn't done. They'll try to narrow the investigation, Focus it on small players while protecting the bigger system. We need to make sure that doesn't happen. How? Lisa asked. By continuing to release evidence piece by piece. By keeping public attention focused on the core issues. By making it impossible to sweep this under the rug. Trump's determination was evident in his voice. This isn't just about Clinton anymore. It's about whether our government works for the people or for the highest bidder. As the night wore on, the team continued to monitor developments and plan their next steps. The battle was shifting from revelation to accountability, from uncovering evidence to ensuring it led to meaningful change. What had begun as an investigation into one politician's dealings had expanded into a challenge to a deeply entrenched system. Whether that system could be changed remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: it could no longer operate in the shadows. The American people were watching, and they were demanding answers. In his hotel room later that night, Trump stood at the window looking out at the Washington Monument illuminated against the dark sky. The city that had been his adversary and sometimes his home was now the battleground for perhaps his most consequential fight, not for political power, but for the principle that no one, regardless of their connections or influence, should be beyond accountability. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, counterattacks and attempts to discredit their work. But tonight, truth had gained ground against power, and in Washington, that was no small victory. 3 months had passed since Donald Trump first revealed the evidence of the Clinton Foundation's lobbying connections. What had begun as accusations from a political rival had evolved into something much larger, a wide-ranging investigation that touched on fundamental questions about power, influence, and accountability in American politics. The morning sun filtered through the blinds in Trump's Florida office as he reviewed the latest news. The special counsel investigation was still making headlines, with new revelations emerging almost weekly. Today's top story reported that a grand jury had indicted 4 former executives of Global Policy, partners on charges of failing to register as foreign agents and making false statements to federal investigators. Mike entered with coffee for both of them, taking a seat across from Trump's desk. They're still going after the smaller players, he observed, nodding at the headline on Trump's tablet. For now, Trump agreed. But the circle is tightening. These 4 know where the bodies are buried. At least one of them will flip to save themselves. The special counsel, Robert Chen, had been methodical in his approach, starting with the lobbyists and working his way up the chain. So far, 11 people had been charged with various offenses related to unregistered foreign lobbying, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. None were Clinton herself, but many had direct connections to her inner circle. "What's the latest from your contact at Justice?" Trump asked. Mike sipped his coffee before answering. "Chen's team is focusing on the money trail. They've subpoenaed records from banks in 5 countries. Word is they've identified over $200 million in donations that weren't properly disclosed or were routed through shell companies." The investigation had expanded, beyond what even Trump's team had initially uncovered. As federal investigators with subpoena power dug deeper, they found evidence of similar schemes involving other officials and foreign interests. What had started as an investigation into Clinton had become a broader examination of foreign influence in American politics. "And the foundation?" Trump asked. "Fighting the subpoenas tooth and nail," Mike replied. "But they're losing in court. The judge gave them 30 days to turn over all communication records with the listed foreign entities." Trump nodded, satisfied with the progress, but aware that the biggest tests still lay ahead. "And Clinton herself?" Mike's expression turned serious. Still no direct evidence linking her to knowledge of the scheme. Her lawyers maintained she was isolated from the foundation's operations while at state, and that any policy decisions were made on legitimate grounds by career officials. This had been the most frustrating aspect of the investigation. Despite mountains of circumstantial evidence, the timing of donations, the emails from staffers, the pattern of policy shifts, there remained a gap between the scheme itself and Clinton's personal knowledge or direction of it. "She was too careful," Trump acknowledged. "Never put anything in writing, always maintained plausible deniability." Their conversation was interrupted by a call. Jack was on the line, his voice urgent. "You need to turn on the news." "Right now." Trump grabbed the remote and switched on the television. Breaking news banners flashed across the screen as a somber anchor reported the latest development. Thomas Baker, the former head of Global Policy Partners, had agreed to a plea deal with prosecutors. In exchange for reduced charges, he would provide testimony about the entire operation of the lobbying scheme. "This is the break we've been waiting for," Jack said over the speakerphone. Baker was in the room for everything. He ran the day-to-day operations connecting donors to policymakers. Trump and Mike watched as legal analysts on the screen debated the implications. Most agreed this was a significant turning point. Baker was the highest-ranking figure yet to cooperate, and his testimony could implicate others much higher up the chain. "There's more," Jack continued. "I have a source who says Baker has provided emails showing that Clinton's chief of staff was regularly briefed on the connection between donations and lobbying priorities." "The chief of staff isn't Clinton," Mike pointed out. "No," Jack agreed. "But it collapses the distance between the scheme and Clinton herself. It makes it much harder to maintain she was in the dark about what was happening." The weeks that followed brought a flurry of developments. Baker's cooperation led to new indictments, including Clinton's former chief of staff and 2 senior foundation executives. Each new charge brought the investigation closer to Clinton herself. Public opinion, initially divided along partisan lines, had shifted as the evidence mounted. Polls showed growing numbers of Americans, including many Democrats, believed the allegations were credible and warranted thorough investigation. Several prominent Democrats in Congress had distanced themselves from Clinton, calling for transparency and accountability, regardless of political affiliation. Clinton herself remained defiant in her rare public statements, maintaining her innocence and characterizing the investigation as politically motivated. But her influence within her party was waning, as younger politicians sought to position themselves as reformers, untainted by the old system. Trump watched these developments with mixed emotions. There was vindication, certainly. His claims, initially dismissed as political attacks, had been proven substantially correct. But there was also concern about the broader implications for the country's institutions and the public's trust in government. 6 months into the special counsel investigation, Trump received an unexpected request. Chen, the special counsel, wanted to meet privately off the record. Such a meeting was unusual, potentially controversial, but Trump agreed, bringing only Mike with him as a witness. They met in a secure conference room at the Justice Department, swept for recording devices before the discussion began. Chen, a serious man with a reputation for independence and integrity, got straight to the point. "Mr. Trump, I want to be clear that this meeting isn't about the specifics of our investigation, which I cannot and will not discuss. Rather, it's about a broader concern that has emerged from our work." Trump nodded, intrigued. "Go on." "What we've uncovered goes beyond any single foundation or individual," Chen explained. "We've found evidence of similar schemes involving officials from both parties, lobbying firms representing dozens of foreign entities, and policy decisions across multiple administrations." This wasn't entirely surprising to Trump. His team's investigation had focused on Clinton, but they had seen hints of a larger system at work. "In short," Chen continued, "we're looking at a systemic problem of foreign influence that has become deeply embedded in Washington. Addressing it fully would implicate powerful figures across the political spectrum and potentially destabilize foreign relationships." The implication was clear. The investigation was touching on interests far more powerful than one former Secretary of State. "Are you saying you're being pressured to limit the scope?" Trump asked directly. Chen's expression remained neutral. "I'm saying that there are significant institutional forces concerned about how far this goes. My mandate is to follow the evidence where it leads, but I'm encountering resistance." "What do you want from me?" Trump asked. "Public support for the independence of this investigation, regardless of who it implicates, including figures who might be allies of yours, and your help in building bipartisan backing for reforms that would address the underlying problems, not just punish individual actors." It was a moment of choice for Trump. The investigation he had initiated was offering him a chance to score political points against a longtime rival. But Chen was asking for something more: commitment to systemic reform that might implicate allies as well as adversaries. After a moment's consideration, Trump nodded. "I started this to expose the truth, not just to target one person. If the truth is bigger and more complicated than we initially thought, then that's what the American people deserve to know. The meeting concluded with a tacit understanding. Chen would continue his investigation without political interference, and Trump would use his influence to build support for eventual reforms, regardless of partisan interests. In the months that followed, the investigation continued to expand. Additional indictments came down, including several surprising names from both parties. The financial trails led to lobbying efforts by foreign governments, ranging from Middle Eastern monarchies to European democracies, all using similar methods to influence American policy. Public awareness of the issue grew, with news organizations dedicating investigative teams to mapping the networks of influence that had operated largely unseen for decades. Congressional hearings continued, now with a broader focus on systemic reform rather than individual culpability. 1 year after Trump's initial revelation, he was asked to testify before a bipartisan commission established to recommend comprehensive reforms to foreign lobbying laws, campaign finance regulations, and government ethics rules. The hearing room was different this time, less charged with partisan tension, more focused on constructive solutions. Trump, once seen primarily as a political disruptor, was now being sought out as a voice for reform. "Mr. Trump," began the commission chair, "your investigation into the Clinton Foundation's connections to unregistered foreign lobbying sparked what has become a much broader examination of foreign influence in our political system. Based on what you've learned through this process, what reforms do you believe are most essential?" Trump had given this considerable thought. His perspective had evolved as the full scope of the problem became clear. "First," he began, "we need complete transparency. Any organization or individual representing foreign interest must register, with no loopholes or exceptions. The current system allows too many to operate in the shadows, calling themselves consultants or advisors when they're actually lobbyists," he continued. "Second, we need stronger firewalls between donations, whether to campaigns, foundations, or other organizations, and policy decisions. The appearance of quid pro quo arrangements undermines public trust, even when direct corruption can't be proven." Trump spoke for nearly an hour, drawing on the lessons from his team's investigation and the broader findings that had emerged since. He emphasized that the problem transcended partisan divisions and required solutions that would be applied regardless of political affiliation. As the hearing concluded, a reporter asked Trump about Clinton specifically. The special counsel had yet to bring charges against her directly, though many in her inner circle had been indicted. "My focus isn't on any individual's legal fate," Trump replied, surprising many with his measured tone. "It's on fixing a broken system that has allowed foreign influence to operate unchecked for too long. Whether certain individuals face legal consequences is for the justice system to decide. What matters is that the American people now understand how their government has really been working and demand better." It was a perspective that few would have expected from Trump when this journey began. What had started as a political investigation had evolved into something more significant, a genuine effort to address fundamental flaws in the system of government itself. In the 2 years following Trump's initial revelations, the landscape of American politics was transformed in ways few could have predicted. The special counsel investigation eventually led to over 30 indictments and 15 convictions, including several high-ranking officials from multiple administrations. Clinton herself was never indicted, though the investigation permanently damaged her public standing and political influence. More importantly, Congress passed the most comprehensive lobbying and government ethics reform package in decades. The new laws closed loopholes that had allowed unregistered foreign influence to flourish, established stronger disclosure requirements for donations to foundations and nonprofits tied to public officials, and created more robust enforcement mechanisms. The reform effort had gained rare bipartisan support, with politicians from both parties recognizing that public trust in government had reached dangerously low levels. The exposure of the lobbying schemes had created a moment of opportunity for change that transcended normal partisan divisions. On a crisp fall morning, 2 years to the day after the first press conference revealing the evidence against Clinton, Trump sat in his office reflecting on the journey. Lisa, Jack, Kim, and Mike had joined him for what had become an annual reunion of the team that had started it all. "Did you ever imagine it would lead to all this?" Lisa asked, gesturing to the newspaper on the desk which featured a story about the impact of the new reforms. Trump shook his head. We were focused on exposing one scheme. We had no idea we were pulling on a thread that would unravel so much more. The system fought back hard, Jack recalled. There were moments I thought they'd managed to bury it all. But the evidence was too strong to ignore, Kim added. Once people saw the pattern, they couldn't unsee it. Mike, who had remained Trump's closest advisor throughout, offered a more philosophical perspective. The real victory wasn't bringing down any particular person. It was showing the American people how their government actually worked. The good, the bad, and the ugly. You can't fix problems you can't see.